Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and over the next hour, we'll do it like we always do. We'll talk a lot of New Orleans Saints football. We'll get into the New Orleans Pelicans and also a little bit about the LSU Tigers as well, and we got a great panel for you tonight. Joining us on the program for the first time is Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com, and we'll be joined shortly by Handwerger of WWLTV.com. And Rachel, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Certainly appreciate it. First of all, we always like to kind of get to know our guests a little bit. If you would, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am born and raised here in New Orleans and an LSU grad. I've been working here at NOLA.com for a little over a year now, doing a lot of video. I cover a little bit of everything: Saints, LSU, Tulane, and some Pelicans. And I host a daily Saints show called Black and Gold Today on NOLA.com and an LSU sports show called Talkin' Tigers that airs Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Now, you're a local girl.
Yes.
And went to Dominican High School.
That's correct.
And to LSU.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about getting involved in really what is a kind of a new medium. NOLA.com is kind of leading the way here in New Orleans with again, the video access that you're doing, the video vlogs and everything else that's going on. Talk about how exciting that is for you as a journalist getting involved in that.
Yeah, it's great to be a part of the ever-changing media world, and especially growing up here in New Orleans to get to cover my hometown sports scene. I mean, you just really can't beat it, and so much going on great this season. You know, the Saints had a great year, and you know, I've just loved being able to come back home. And I mean, LSU, of course, is close to home, but there's no place like New Orleans.
Well, I had Catherine Terrell on a couple weeks ago, and how is it being a female in a male-dominated profession, especially covering sports? You know, you guys are kind of picking up from some of the greats of you know, Phyllis George and some of the other greats of the medium, but you know, we see more and more now, more females are covering sports. Talk a little bit about doing that and, of course, having a chance to do it in your own hometown.
Right, absolutely. Catherine Terrell and I worked together at LSU, and now we're working together here at NOLA.com. But, yeah, I mean, being a female in sports journalism definitely has its challenges, no doubt. If we make a mistake, everybody jumps on it. Exactly, yes, which is why we must be experts in everything that we cover. But at the same time, it's a great challenge. You know, it really is. You know, I love being able just to, hey, I get to talk about sports every day for a living.
There's no doubt.
It's a blessing.
Well, I tell you what, you do a great job, and welcome to the program. And let's get started. It's been a great season for the Saints. I mean, a lot of people, were especially after the fast start, were thinking division championship. Maybe this thing would be wound up by Halloween. Of course, when they started falling back to the pack, and then when they had their troubles in the back end of the season, you know, maybe the fan base got a little bit disgruntled. Not being able to win consistently on the road, losing to inferior teams like the Jets in St. Louis, obviously put a damper on the season. But overall, your thoughts on the Saints season and how they performed this year?
Right. When they started off the season 5-0, nobody was even looking at the Falcons and Panthers and Bucks as possible contenders in this division. But then the home and the road disparity really hurt the Saints this season. And in turn, you know, Drew Brees, again, a great quarterback, great leader, but when he was on the road, he struggled to take care of the ball, and that was something that stood out. And you know, but the Saints defense was wonderful to watch. You know, coming off almost finishing worst in the league in 2012 under Steve Spagnuolo, coming back with Rob Ryan, he definitely a player's coach. You could tell, and that defense. I mean, being able to carry the team when the offense was sputtering at points before they kind of found their running game a little bit.
Well, something that I don't think even maybe the coaches realized. And definitely I don't think the fan base realized. You know, they found this defense by accident. I mean, they were counting on Vilman, Hopper, and Smith. They were counting on really the older guys to come in. And I mean, across the board, you heard it in the whole offseason, when a lot of us, you know, myself included, were saying, this team's got to get younger. They got to get more athletic. One of the big problems that we have seen over the last couple seasons was, again, guys not being able to make it to the corner in time. Over and over again, guys reaching to make tackles, just being maybe a step slow. And then, of course, the injuries happen in the preseason, and all of a sudden, all these young guys start to emerge. And you're automatically thinking, well, look, they still got this prolific offense. This is going to be amazing. You put this defense with this prolific offense, and then all of a sudden, wow, you've got a Super Bowl contending team. It was the offense that sputtered. Exactly.
That was the thing that was just so perplexing, was we expected the offense to put up, you know, these amazing numbers, but in reality, you know, the defense had to carry them at some points. But, you know, the thing about the defense, they weren't quite able to force enough turnovers, and I think that's what got them in the postseason, you know. I mean, they were able to get away with it, you know, against the Eagles. I mean, I was reading that teams that finish a playoff game at -2 or worse in the turnover margin were 6 and 133.
It's an amazing record.
Yeah. So turnover margin is key, and they just could not win it. You know, against a team like Seattle in their place, that was just it was not going to get it done.
Now you're a New Orleans girl, and you've seen this team for a long time.
Yes.
And we've talked about it. The fan base kind of spoiled, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, if you go back to, you know, the early years of the Saints, really all the way up into the Moore years, and then some down years again. And then, of course, when Peyton comes in, from the time he got here to now, they have been a contender.
Exactly.
You know, there's an expectation that this team should be in the Super Bowl or contending for a Super Bowl every year.
Most definitely, yeah. And from hearing stories, you know, from my father
about stories.
Oh yeah, from the bags on the head
Yes.
days. You know, it's hard for fans today maybe even to think about that, because Drew Brees has been here, you know, since Sean Payton's been here, and you know the defense been kind of hit and miss. But if you look back to the Super Bowl team, all those defensive touchdowns, which they had none of this year, and that was a shame.
It's almost like they used them all up during that season, because they haven't been able to really generate those type of turnovers and those type of scores. It is going to be something, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later on in the program, that ultimately they're going to have to solve in the offseason. They're going to need a playmaker on that back end, and we'll get into that. We'll take our first break. When we come back, Bradley Handwerger of WWLTV.com will join us. Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com, our guest. Looking forward to a great discussion over the next hour. Remember, you're always invited to join. 504-866-3200. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Families come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes your friends are your family by choice, or sometimes you're just stuck with Uncle Charles. But what we know is that you want to protect the people that are close to you. But the flu can unravel everything. Your flu vaccine protects you and your family. No matter what draws your family together, protect yourself, protect your family. Everyone needs a flu vaccine.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Each and every Thursday night, 6 o'clock, we go live and we talk about the best in New Orleans sports. The Saints, the Pelicans, LSU, and Tulane. We invite you to join us each and every week, and we also invite you to join us on the telephone at 504-866-3200. We have a great panel for you tonight. Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com, and we're also joined by Bradley Handwerger of WWLTV.com. And Bradley, welcome to the show, and your second appearance. We appreciate you being with us. And once again, tell us a little bit about what's happening over at WWL.
Well, now that we're out of Saint season, it's kind of some wrap-up stuff. It's looking back at positions that maybe had questions coming into the season, or free agency, what's going on and what the players want. And eventually we'll get into Senior Bowl next week, kind of the whole coaching search thing, although this team's probably not going to have any or many openings, and then it's on to the breakdown of each position, just trying to string it out as long as possible.
Right. Well, you know what? It's football 24/7, 365 in this town, and it's something that honestly people can't get enough of. Let's talk a little bit about the. Well, you made a comment about the coaching staff. I'm of the opinion that pretty much every coach is safe. Some have talked about maybe Brett Ingles having a problem at the offensive line as the offensive line coach, but my guess is there won't be any changes on the staff.
I would think the only change that you would think is a possibility would be Greg McMahon at special teams. They've struggled there the last couple of years. They were not very good at it this year. And I heard Rachel say earlier, no defensive touchdown returns. They had no special teams returns either.
None of any kind.
Yeah, it was actually, they were the only team with no defensive or special teams return for a touchdown this year. So, you know, they struggled.
He's one of the originals now, isn't he? He's been with this team since.
He's been the team, it's not 06, it's been 07.
07, pretty close.
Almost, yeah.
You know, that's the only place this team fully struggled in every phase of the game this year. I mean, Thomas Morstead was good, but obviously they had problems with kicking. Garrett Hartley, you know, was let go at the end of the season. Shane Graham came in, missed the field goals in Seattle. So that's, as far as position coaches go, that's the only one I would think would have any, and I don't think he has anything to worry about.
Rachel, what's your thoughts? Any coaching changes on the staff, do you think?
Yeah, I'm with Bradley. If anything, you know, maybe Coach McMahon. I mean, we saw Shane Graham, what a hero he was against Philadelphia, but you know, in the tough conditions of Seattle, that was not agreeing with him and could not help the Saints there. But yeah, I mean, I think I could see everything being intact.
Right, I do too. I mean, again, one thing that he's had through most of his tenure here is continuity. And he's got his guys on that staff that he really trusts. It would be interesting to see if he does make any changes.
And sometimes it may not come down to him making changes. Somebody may come after one of his coaches.
Sure.
So you have to look out for that as well.
Well, Ryan Pace was just, again, the Miami Dolphins wanted to talk to him recently about the general manager's job, and the Saints flat turned him down, said that you will not, go after Ryan Pace, which, good news for the Saints, bad news for Ryan Pace, but he's done a great job in the front office. One of the reasons why we've seen so many of these diamonds in the rough come to fruition for this team on both the offensive and defensive side. One of those reasons why, obviously, Ryan Pace.
No question.
He's done a great job. Guys, Saints $17 million over the cap. They got a lot of work to do in this offseason, and I'm one of those that have, in the opinion that we're going to see a changing of the guard. There are a lot of players that have won a lot of games for this team over the last, since 06, that I think are going to be either asked to restructure, take pay cuts, or be cut. We'll go with you first, Rachel. Your thoughts? Do you see that on the horizon here with this team? And then we'll kind of jump into some players that may be on the chopping block here, one way or the other, whether it's restructure, cut, or ultimately have to give some money back.
Right, there's definitely going to be some work to do there. I mean, we heard Drew Brees say, I'll do whatever the team needs, in terms of restructuring his contract. But, I mean, we'll see how much we can actually read into that. But, again, Jimmy Graham is going to be a huge issue, whether they decide to put the franchise tag on him or work out a long-term deal, which they absolutely need to get done. But
Bradley, your thoughts? I mean, again, $17 million over. Lewis has done a great job as a capologist to be able to keep this team under the cap. He understands maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of time what's in front of him, but a lot of familiar names may be gone when the season starts next season.
Sure. Look, I subscribe to the theory of Mike Triplett, who works for ESPN.com, who says you don't look at it like they're over the cap. You look at it like, all right, who do we need? They need Drew Brees to stay. Obviously, it's not going to, and that's happened there. But Jimmy Graham, they're going to fit in. If they want Malcolm Jenkins, they're going to fit him in. If they want Zach Strief, they're going to fit him in. And then they'll cut some of the kind of periphery guys. Look, they're over the cap. They're going to be under the cap. And they're going to have who they want to have there. Graham will be back. You look at Strief or Jenkins. These are guys who played pretty well. It's going to be more a matter of where do other teams come in and set the market for them versus what are the Saints going to do with them. Right.
I want to throw some names out to you guys and maybe give me your thoughts on whether you think they'll be here next year or not. The first one's Jonathan Vilma. Been a great player for this team. You guys saw that he wasn't able to come back on that knee. I think he's already realized that probably he is done in terms of football. Guys, you think Vilma will be back next year?
I do not think so. What do you think, Brad?
He's not back.
I would say the same thing for Will Smith. A huge cap number. A guy that probably has some value to a team, but when you look at the young defensive ends that they have on this team right now, probably a guy that won't be back for the Saints.
Exactly, yeah. We saw Cam Jordan, really come on and make it, make the Pro Bowl this year as well. So he was definitely a big surprise as one of those young players that we talked about. So,
I could see them restructuring him and bringing him back at least for training camp. Give him a shot to see if his knees recovered and if he can do anything. It's a lot of veteran leadership that you want back on that in that group and that team. And he obviously, through everything this franchise has gone through, he's been through, and he's really stuck by him.
The question is, for him, would he rather restructure, or would he rather take a chance on catching on with another team and having the opportunity to maybe play more than he would, depending on if he gets down to the last cut, that's a problem.
I'm not sure another team will take a flyer on him, a guy that they don't know other than watching him, and he's coming off of knee surgery. The advantage he has in New Orleans, the coaches know him and know his work ethic and know what he can do.
Project Bunkley last season was almost disappeared. This year, especially the back half of the season, he's played very well, but he has a big contract. Rachel, your thoughts on Bunkley? Will he be back? And if he's back, is he at the same number, or will he be asked to restructure?
That's hard to say. I mean, I could see him being asked to restructure. I mean, he really came in, at that nose tackle spot. He did a really good job. So that'll be interesting to see what they do there. What do you think?
I think he's back, but restructure.
Restructure?
Yeah.
Here's a big one. Jabari Greer, 30 years old, big cap number, coming off a horrific injury. I'm of the opinion, look, he played very well down the stretch for this team until he got injured. And you saw the drop-off when Corey White had to be moved to really kind of out of position. I think he's more of an inside guy than an outside guy. Thoughts on Greer? I mean, I'm of the opinion they're going to try to bring him back at a lesser number, but who knows how effective he can be at this point in his career.
Well, you look at him and his injury. It was a bad enough knee injury, but it happened in November, and you're talking with an ACL at the very least.
Right.
It's a year back before you can actually really even do anything. Throw Adrian Peterson out. The guy's a freak.
Yes.
He's different. So, can they afford to bring him back and let him sit on the bench for 2 months of the regular season? He's going to have to restructure if he wants to come back.
And the good news, and I'll ask you, I'll go to Greer with you in a second. The good news is, again, I want to remind everybody that if they cut someone, again, it is the signing bonus that comes due, and they can amortize that over 2 seasons. So they're not taking that cap hit just in 1 year. They're able to spread that over 2 seasons. Yeah. Jabari Greer, is he back?
I'm not sure. I mean, that was one of the most gruesome injuries that I've ever seen when he went down with that knee. That was so hard to watch. But I mean, he's also one of those big veterans on this team that I could see them wanting to do some work with him. The
key of what you said with him is age.
It is.
Yeah.
He's to that point where whether he was injured or not, he's probably going to start the downhill slide.
He's a declining player.
That's going to be a tough one for Mickey Loomis.
No, I think it'll be tough for the organization because let's face it, for a long time he was the best corner on this team.
Exactly.
And look, one of the things I think one of the faults that we've seen with Peyton as a head coach is maybe he stays with his players a little too long. He has an allegiance to guys that have won Super Bowl, that won a lot of games for him. I think that's got to be a little bit of a change going forward, realizing that a lot of those guys that won for him, they're aging now.
Yeah, they paid dearly when Corey White had to fill in for Jabari Greer. Opponents targeted him as often as they could.
I'm not necessarily sure Sean does stick with his players. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is John Stinchcomb. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who was one of his key players in that stretch of during the Super Bowl run, and the next season played through a torn quad, I believe, and still played well. You would think that he would have kept him around just out of allegiance, but he let go of him pre-2011. He's got it in his past of letting go of guys when he should let go of them.
And let's face it, Stinchcomb never played again.
Right.
I mean, he was pretty much done at that point when he was finished. Roman Harper is an interesting case. A guy, again, you're looking at where he's approaching 30, if not 30. Mm-hmm. A guy that restructured his deal last year. The player that a lot of Saints fans love to hate. Roman Harper coming back?
I'm going to say no, but it's a very uncommitted no. But, yeah, what do you think?
Honestly, I think what they do with him will depend on what they do with Malcolm. Because while one plays strong, one plays free, you've got Kenny Vaccaro back there who does everything. And then you can also use Raphael Bush in that position.
Who played very well this year.
Played very well down the stretch.
He's a restricted free agent, Bush, yeah.
So if you're willing to let Bush kind of go in and play, then you actually can let Roman go, and if you keep Malcolm, you want one of those veterans back there for sure.
Interesting scenario what's going to happen with Malcolm as well. as we discussed, they're going to be looking for a playmaker on the back end. They have not gotten a lot of turnovers back there. Vaccaro's not a guy, even in his time at Texas, that had a lot of turnovers. You look at Raphael Bush, a hitter, but not a guy that has created a lot of turnovers. They almost need to go after a safety or somebody on the back end that can create turnovers. Even Keenan Lewis, you look at his time at Pittsburgh, not a guy that had a lot of interceptions. So that's something that they're going to have to look at going forward. And they may have to be in a situation where they're saying, you know what, I'm going to pay Malcolm X amount of dollars, but I may be able to go out and get a playmaker that I can put back there that can do what this team didn't do, as we discussed, which is turn the ball over.
Exactly.
Well, you know, the funny thing about Keenan Lewis is he doesn't have the opportunities because he shuts everybody down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They don't go after him. The few times you see a quarterback go after him in the game, it's incomplete or he breaks it up. So I mean that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
Rachel?
not at all. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, we saw how valuable Keenan Lewis was to this team. I mean, they put him on the opponent's #1 receiver almost every game. I mean, we saw, you know, against Philadelphia when he was on Deshaun Jackson, no catches. And then after he left was when they targeted him, and he was able to catch a few passes. But yeah, we see how valuable Keenan Lewis is. He's been great to watch.
Offensively, there's been rumbles. I mean, my phone was lighting up today with people talking about the Saints cutting Marcus Colston, also Lance Moore, and Pierre Thomas. Now, I'm not of the opinion any of those guys are getting cut,
No.
but I do believe that those guys will be asked to restructure. Rachel, your thoughts?
Yeah. I think Pierre is a good person to bring up. I mean, we saw him, you know, unfortunate that he was injured during the postseason, but the Saints did just fine without him. I mean, look at the tandem that Mark Ingram and Kyrie Robinson were able to put together. And I mean, I could see Kyrie Robinson being a starter next year. I mean, from West Texas A&M, who would have thought? But yeah, Pierre's an interesting one to keep an eye on.
I think Lance and Pierre may be asked to restructure for sure. I don't know about Colston. You know, this may be one of those things where what he has done for this franchise, they may say, let's just let him be. That's not business savvy,
right?
But,
no,
it's,
and again, when you get down to it, I mean, if you're going to ask Breeze to restructure, and again, restructuring, you know, again, maybe turning his base salary into a signing bonus, you know, down the line here, that's going to be an interesting question there. Darren Sproles, a guy that ultimately has done a lot for this team, but aging a bit, not really the player that he was in terms of the return game. Still a guy that obviously can catch the ball out of the backfield and can run at times. Is he a guy that ultimately is asked to restructure for this team?
I think part of the thing with Darren Sproles, and let's get on the field before we talk about that, is that teams have figured out how to defend this offense a little bit, and taking away his speed is still there. You watch him catch the ball, he still gets the corners as quickly as he ever has. It's that teams know when the screen's coming. Teams know how to get him and cover him out of the backfield. I think that's something that if Sean Payton wants him around the next season or wants to kind of make him a high-profile player, he's going to have to figure out a different way to get him out.
Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make a good point. Darren Sproles is, you know, kind of aging a little bit, you know, and I totally agree. I mean, he's so explosive. Teams always have to account for him, but in terms of, I mean, we saw against Seattle, they snuffed out the screen game completely. You know, they were not able to get anything going there. But again, Sproles is that guy that opponents have to game plan for. So it'll be interesting. Ben
Grubbs made the Pro Bowl. I don't know how he made the Pro Bowl, but he made the Pro Bowl. He's got a hefty salary coming up this season. Will he be a guy that will still be here, or will he be a guy that will be asked to restructure his deal?
Oh, he'll be around. They're not going to get rid of him, but you know, at some point, there's only so many guys you can restructure. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if if he stayed as was. You know, maybe restructure a little bit the signing bonus deal that you said, but. They have a lot tied up in the interior of the line, but the interior of the line is what makes this offense go, because they want their tackles to fan out and let Drew have a clean pocket.
Right, exactly.
Yes, definitely.
How about Grubbs?
Yeah, I do agree with Bradley on that. Yeah.
Interesting scenario that's going to come up now, and it's with Jimmy Graham. And there was an article by Jason Cole this week in National Football Post, where he took some numbers from Pro Football Focus. The cap number for a tight end is $6 million. The cap number for a wide receiver is about $10.4 million. According to Pro Football Focus, during the regular season, Graham lined up as a tight end 49.8% of the time. During the playoffs, he lined up at the wide receiver position. He was split wide 69.6% of the time. In 2012, he played 65% of his downs in the slot or split wide. That tells me that if the Saints are going to tag him, they're going to have to tag him as a wide receiver. The big question is, do you go out and sign him long term with wide receiver numbers or as a tight end number? And then if you have to tag him, are you willing to tag him as a wide receiver at about $10 million a year on a team that's cash strapped? And we'll take you first, Rachel. Right,
yeah, that's going to be one of the major questions of this offseason as to how to make sure that Jimmy Graham comes back. I mean, of course, they're not going to let him go. I mean, look what he did for this team this year, leading the entire NFL in touchdowns and touchdown receptions. But again, I mean, it's going to be a challenge because he and his camp are going to want wide receiver type money,
yes.
But the Saints, of course, they're going to see what they can do in terms of giving him tight end money, I'm sure, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a struggle. They're going to fight with his agent. It's going to be drawn out. And while the Saints would like to get him under a long-term contract before free agency starts, it's not going to happen.
No.
Because he has zero incentive at this point to make a contract. The Saints would have been much better off before the 2013 season signing him, and you're reaping what they sow at this point. So, I would not be surprised if they ended up having to tag him as a wide receiver.
Which again, $10.4 million.
$4 million more than a tight end.
That is tough. And then again, you have to look forward to the following season where Cam Jordan comes up for a contract. And you don't want to be in a situation where you haven't signed Graham to a long-term deal, and then all of a sudden you're having to make a choice. Do I tag Graham or do I tag Cam Jordan? That is a tough spot for this team to be in.
Oh, that is a situation they do not want to be in. I mean, those two players have done so much for this team by themselves. So yeah, getting Graham, I could see them having to tag him.
That is going to be a rough scenario. Again, in the article that I read by Jason Cole, he made it sound like the Saints had almost kind of regulated his playing time, looking to be able to see if ultimately they could keep him at the tight end position. But again, he's not the greatest blocker in the world. He is a guy that ultimately plays much better, obviously, in that slot or as a wideout.
Oh, he has a lot of maturing to do in football. He's only played. This was his fifth year of organized football, I believe.
Right.
Fifth year.
So he's still going to have to fully learn blocking on the line. And the biggest thing for me with Graham is that he's going to have to figure out how to deal with the physical cornerbacks and defensive backs that play him. Now, on the one hand, there's only so many guys in the league that can play him that way.
Right.
On the other hand, he's going to see them every year in the playoffs, so he's going to have to figure out at some point. The Saints are going to have to get him to figure out at some point how to mentally get by the physical play. You look at Tony Gonzalez, and that's the guy that Jimmy should really look at. Is when he's being played physically, he's just as physical back as the defensive backs are.
Well, and I'll add this to that. Also, and in the upcoming draft, I don't know if they're going to be a player in free agency here, but they've got to upgrade that wide receiver position. If they are in a position where they can get playmakers at the wide receiver position, it is going to be very difficult to be able to double team Jimmy Graham. So that has to be one of their priorities going into this offseason, to take a look at that wide receiving core and somehow upgrade that wide receiving core so you're not in a position where teams can go in and they can double Jimmy Graham.
Right, exactly, yeah. And even looking into the draft, in terms, there are a few wide receivers out there. We had some mock drafts that came out today. I had the Saints at 27 getting, this is so early. We're talking about mock drafts. Can you believe it? But Kelvin Benjamin, that 6'5" from Florida State. I mean, he's kind of like almost a little bit bigger Marcus Colston.
Right.
So we were just talking about Colston earlier. But so yeah, I think upgrading the receiver position is going to be big.
I think it's got to be one of the priorities here in the offseason, right?
Yeah.
There in cornerback to me, or I don't think there's any glaring hole that they need to fill like they have in the past. But there's some depth issues and some issues with positions aging, and I think those, your receiver and your cornerback, are where that's needed.
Receiver, cornerback, I would have to put offensive line in there as well, depending on what they're going to do. As you know, Charles Brown is a free agent. Zach Street was a free agent, and Brian De La Puente is a free agent. Had Mike DeCilio on this program last week. He said the Saints' plans were to move Tim Lelito from the guard position into that center position. If they can't sign De La Puente, that would give them a bigger center, something that they've missed since Jonathan Goodwin hasn't been here. But there still needs to be obviously an upgrade on that offensive line. In the past, the Saints have been able to do that in the middle rounds and be able to find diamonds in the rough. But would you guys agree? Offensive line, wide receiver, cornerback, cornerback and maybe a playmaking safety, or the four needs for this team?
Yeah, I would totally agree. Yeah, and before Teron Armstead really settled in, I would have put offensive line as a higher need. But now that they've established some faith in him, and I mean, look what he's done. You know, compared to his first game, he's really settled in and has given up maybe 1 or 2 sacks since then. But yeah, I mean, Charles Brown, I think, is gone. Don't you think?
Yeah, I can't see him coming back.
No.
I mean, I would say depth at offensive line, but you look at linebacker would be another one, age-wise, that I think that they would need maybe another guy or two. I mean, if I were to order it right now, I would say wide receiver, cornerback are 1A and 1B, and then I would say probably offensive line depth, not necessarily looking for a guy in free agency. I think there's a way for them to bring Strief back. You move Lolito over, and you're fine on the offensive line. But you need depth there more than anything, and then linebacker.
Yeah.
Here's a question: can Charles Brown play the right side, or is he done for this team?
I think he is done for this team.
It's going to be hard for him to overcome mentally what happened to him after the St. Louis game, and move to the other side of the line.
Yeah.
I watched Teron Armstead very closely after his first game. As I went back and looked at the tape of each game, I thought he performed very well for a guy, especially that didn't have a tremendous amount of experience. Again, in the beginning, I thought everybody maybe thought that experiment was a failure, especially after his first game.
Right.
But it looks like he solidified that left side and maybe is the left tackle of the future. Rachel?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, actually. And right in the beginning, fans might have been scratching their heads. Sean Payton, what were you thinking? But yeah, and the Saints have started to run toward his side, and he's opened up some holes for them. And I mean, we saw how important the running game was in the playoffs. Good against Philadelphia, and even against Seattle, they got some big runs at.
I mean, let's not forget that when his first start came at Carolina,
he
went against Greg.
Only going against Greg Hardy.
Finished the year with 15 sacks.
Yeah.
He had much better games after. In fact, his second half in that game was much better than his first half in that game. I think, and Zach Strief said this the other day in the locker room, the more confidence he got, the better off he was going to be. And we saw it in the press box, and Zach said they were laughing about it on the plane ride on the way home from Seattle, is that Teron is just happy to be here and was coming out of the tunnel and waving the crowd to get into the game. Said he didn't even know where he was at that point. He was just happy to be playing. So the longer he is around and has experience, and this offseason is going to be huge for him because he has the entire offseason now to work.
Right.
He's better. I think they're fine at left tackle.
Oh yeah. He said, yeah, my goal is to make you guys not talk about me.
Right.
So,
which again, we want to do with an offensive lineman.
Exactly.
But if you can get him to solidify that left side, you can get a little bigger at the center position. All of a sudden, you're probably in a little better position, because I'm of the opinion that the strength of the NFC now is in the NFC West. They are a bigger.
Absolutely.
You look at them across the board. The offensive lines are big. They can run the football effectively. They're in a different position than maybe the Saints are, again, because they're a lot of their young stars have not reached their second contract yet, and they're going to start feeling some pain down the line here, having to pay quarterbacks, having to pay some of their superstar players. But even Carolina is kind of built like an NFC West team, and the Saints proved anything during this playoffs. They proved they can run the football.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, when the Saints go back and self-scout themselves in the offseason, do they take a look and see that, again, maybe especially looking at Drew Brees in the twilight of his career, the ability to protect him, the easiest way to do that is to protect quarterbacks with a running game. Do they try to get back with, again, a bigger offensive line, protect Brees so he has that ability to be able to climb that pocket ladder up the middle and ultimately run the football, maybe run the football a little bit more than what we've seen during the Payton era? Rachel, we'll take you first.
Right, absolutely. The more complementary football this Saints offense can play, it's gonna be hugely important for how successful they are in the future. And Pierre Thomas pushes the pile all the time. So it was hard to see him go down with that, with his chest injury. But luckily Ingram and Robinson were able to shoulder the load well. But yeah, I think when Sean Payton commits to the run, which he did in the postseason and on the road especially, the Saints are gonna do well with that.
Bradley, we saw the screen getting snuffed out all the time, and it was toward the back end of the season. Teams understood that there was an extension of their running game. They weren't willing to run the football. They were willing to run the football in the postseason. Will we see a little bit of a change here going forward, or will it still be Air Payton?
I think you got to look at it this way. First of all, they came into the season saying they were going to focus on the run, and they tried to early in the season. They couldn't do it. you are who you are. I mean, this offense is built around Drew Brees and his ability to pass the ball and work from option 1 to option 2 to option 3 to option 4, all in a quick read. I don't think they're going to get rid of the air Payton, as you called it.
No.
They may run the ball a little bit more, but I think you're going to see the offense as we've seen it the last couple of years. I mean, it's the way it is. I mean, Drew Brees has thrown 5,000 yards for three straight seasons. They're not slowing down at all in offense. Now, where the run game comes into play is on the road, and I think you may see some different game plans on the road.
Receivers had a tough time getting off the jam. It was one of the big reasons why Brees was not able to go through his progressions. You compound that with an offensive line that was porous, and you see some of the problems that the Saints had, especially on the road. We talked about it a little bit. Will we see wholesale changes that wide receiver core? I mean, again, these guys they're aging a bit. They got to prove that ultimately they can perform as they performed in the past to be able to allow Brees to be able to be the quarterback that he was in the past in terms of being able to go through those progressions. At times, the shock and awe, the long plays that we haven't seen. I mean, the lack of Joe Morgan this year, the lack of a deep threat. How much does that change in the offseason?
I think you hit on it with Joe Morgan. When this Saints offense was really going well in 2009, 2011, they had Devery and Robert Meacham really running and extending the field and opening up the underneath. Without Joe Morgan, you lost that this year. And Kenny Stills, while fast, only one guy's not necessarily going to do it and doesn't open up everything. I think if Joe Morgan comes back and can have, his knee can hold up and has the speed, they'll be all right at receiver. Maybe Lance Moore is out and somebody else comes in, but I don't think it's going to be wholesale changes on the receiver core.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. You really hit the nail on the head. Losing Joe Morgan, right? He was going to be their deep threat guy, but not having him this season, they had to see what Kenny Stills could do. But again, I mean, Drew Brees, he completes passes to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different receivers per game, and then you have somebody like Jimmy Graham back there too who gets double teamed. I mean, teams are absolutely accounting for him as well. So yeah.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host Eric Asher. Each and every Thursday night at 6 o'clock right here on WLAE TV, with a rebroadcast every Friday night at 10 o'clock on WLAE TV and Pelican Sports Television. Our panel tonight: Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com and Bradley Handwerger of WWLTV.com. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue our conversation about the Saints. We'll also talk about the Pelicans and LSU. You're always invited to join the conversation at 504-866-3200. Stay tuned.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't, because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic: 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm Eric Asher, along with Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com and Bradley Handwerger of WWLTV.com. And guys, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the Pelicans. But as always, 504-866-3200 if you'd like to join the conversation. We'll talk Saints, we'll talk LSU, Tulane, or Pelicans with you. Pelicans on a 7-game losing streak, 15-23. They were hovering around 500. And let's face it, injuries have really killed this season. You lose Anthony Davis early. You lose Ryan Anderson early. And, of course, now looks like he's going to be out for at least 2 months. Drew Holiday goes down. Evans was dealing with an injury early, obviously with the ankle. That's flared up again. And ultimately, this team is really hurting now because of the injuries. There's a little bit of a silver lining there now because you're getting to see maybe some young players that you may not have seen. But I guess the first question is, can this team realistically compete for the 8th spot in the playoffs with the lineup they're putting on the floor consistently right now with the injuries?
I'm not ready to say that. No, I mean, when you talk about all the injuries, it sounds like we're talking about the Saints again, all the injuries they had on defense that plagued them throughout the season. But they were able to recover. But the Pelicans, though, they are just feeling the pain. I mean, losing Ryan Anderson has been a huge blow, and Drew Holiday, too. I mean, one of their prized acquisitions there. And, they have chances to stay in games, but when you're playing the Houston Rockets, you have a 17-point fourth quarter lead, and you blow it on your home court. That does not bode well.
Right. It's been one of the problems for this team.
But that's not anything new. That's been several seasons long that's happened.
Yeah. The injuries.
I think the injuries are a big part of it, no question. Ryan Anderson is 3 of your top 5 leading scorers right now are sidelined. It's hard to win games when it happens. Right. But I still think it's a bigger issue than the injuries. I'm not sure. Their defense is ranked among the worst defenses in the NBA. And
with a defensive-minded coach.
With a defensive-minded coach. And I think injuries or not, I think that's their main problem. And is it that they're not understanding what Monty is teaching them? Is it that Monty's not willing to kind of mold his defense around what the players on the roster can do? I think that's a large part of it. And until they can correct that, until they can figure out how to stop teams from scoring and really just getting down the paint easily and unguarded, then they're going to have problems.
No, I agree with you, but there's a little bit of a silver lining here. And if there's a silver lining is, again, you're kind of getting a chance to see your bench. Guys that are playing more minutes than expected. Darius Miller, Austin Rivers, Brian Roberts, even Jeff Withey getting some minutes now. So you're getting a chance to see those guys, and maybe it'll give you a little opportunity to kind of see if they're going to fit in with this team long term. Is that something that obviously can help this team in the future? Is that something that the fan base can take away and say, well, we've got these injuries, but at least we're getting a chance to see some of these second team guys, and maybe down the line that this will be the beginning of putting together a total team?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the fan base could use anything to be excited about right now. Huh? I mean, I think disgruntled would be the word to describe the fan base. But anyway, yeah. I mean, if you have injuries like this, obviously you're going to get to see who can fill in for them. And it was a shame about Darius Miller's basket failing last night. And I mean, Eric Gordon. You look at somebody like him who he's got 33 points. And then in the fourth quarter, he scores 2.
Right.
Right. That's not going to get it done. No.
I mean, if you're the overly optimistic person. I
was trying to be optimistic.
Absolutely.
I was trying to be. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Absolutely, that's a silver lining. But there's a reason these guys are bench players to begin with. Yeah. They can't compete with the starters for the Rockets or the starters for the Thunder or the starters for anybody else in the NBA, except maybe the Kings. It's hard to look for the silver lining or see a silver lining when you see the product that's on the floor and it's not improving at all.
Right.
Well, and part of the problem, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, is the inability to close out games. And as you mentioned, Bradley, it's been a problem now for a few seasons, under Monty Williams, for a guy that, again, teaches such strong defensive principles not to be able to close these games out. And I don't know if you can expect the second-tier guys to come in and be any better than what you were doing when you had your full-blown starting lineup out there.
It's partly the inability for Monty to be able to stop the runs. All right, call a timeout, do something, throw a guy out there to foul someone. There's not a lot of creativity coming from that bench in these situations to stop these runs.
I agree, but Rachel?
Right, absolutely, yeah. It's it starts with the head coach, and the player, and he has to try and figure out just anything that works for this team. And when they're blowing leads, it's like they've come close. The past 3 games, they've lost by a combined 9 points. So you could say that they're making progress, but at the same time, in each game, it's like you have a big chance to pull a big upset against the Rockets, and you're right there. But again, it's just can't close it out.
I remember writing a column after the Lakers game last season when the same exact thing happened. So it's the frustrating thing that it happens time and again, and you don't see anything happening. There's no progression, and for teams that are going to make the playoffs eventually, you see progression. You don't see any progression with this team.
But is that a byproduct, guys, of the injuries this team has suffered with arguably their top players. I mean, the nucleus of what they thought when you're losing Davis, when you're losing Anderson, Holiday, Evans, is that a byproduct? When they were trying to mesh, is that a byproduct of that, or is it a byproduct of the bench and the coaching staff?
Right, fans were excited to see this nucleus work together on the court, and injuries have just prevented that. And I don't know.
But I guess I look at it down the stretch. It's on defense where you're going to win these games,
right.
And the guys that are out aren't really their top defenders.
No, they're not.
Right.
So whether they're in or not, I don't think that's changing anything.
Yeah.
Well, then one of the questions is, do they have the right mix of players going forward? I mean, they have a nice lineup, but I don't know if they mesh, okay, as a team. Your thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a lot of vision right now for the direction of this team with the roster. I think Dell Demps is playing fantasy basketball with a real basketball team.
Yeah,
he's buying pieces and selling them and isn't really sure what direction they're going. And if he does have a direction, he's not letting the media or fans or anybody know or inside. And I understand that there has to be some secrecy,
yes.
But you also you owe it to your fan base, the season ticket holders, the people paying the money to come to games, right, to show that you have some kind of plan. And I still come back to, why do they need Tyreek Evans? Why did they get rid of Robin Lopez? That's a piece that they miss right now.
That was huge.
Yeah,
and again,
absolutely.
and a bargain at $5 million a year for a starting center in the NBA, and you look what he's doing in Portland right now.
Right.
I mean, you had him basically for 2 years, and honestly, he was having his best season with the Pelicans. When you look at the transition from where he came from with Phoenix to the Pelicans, he was progressing as a center finally.
Absolutely.
Finally. No, I would agree. That was one of the head-scratching moves that they made in the offseason, because even now, they got some rim protectors. They had to bring in, obviously, Stiesma comes in. He's been injured through most. What is it, Agenza has come in. He's played fairly well, but again,
very young and inexperienced.
He really is. I mean, so you don't really know what you have there. Got great wingspan, 7'9". Yeah. You see he's got the tools, but I mean, hasn't been able to put it together at any time in the NBA. One of the big questions is, and I've been getting this, I've been getting this since the beginning of the season. I know you guys have been getting it since the beginning of the season. It has erupted into a firestorm now with the 7-game winning streak. And the big question is, can Monty survive? Can he survive the season? Is he the coach of the future for this team, Rachel?
Right. I mean, the 7-game losing streak, that does not look good for a head coach. And I mean, like Bradley was saying, no real direction. And I mean, fans want to see that. You know, you can see the frustration around this team, and I'm not sure what that means for Monty.
I mean, we said last time I was on here, you asked the same question, and Brett Martell, the AP, and I both said for him to legitimately stay around, he'd have to compete for the playoff spot. And right now, they're not competing for that last playoff spot.
But does he have a built-in excuse now because of the injuries?
Well, I guess the question is, what point do the excuses stop? He's had 4 different teams here, and I understand that's really tough because you don't build any kind of consistency with the team, any kind of relationship. But at some point, you do, like I was saying, with the progression towards the end of the game, you have to see some kind of progression, and I'm not sure we're seeing it. That said, he does have a lot of injuries. There is an excuse for him there, but something will have to be done, I think. You know, I don't think Tom Benson put together this team and let these parts come in for them to be 15 and 23 at this point, regardless of the injuries.
When you cast the blame on where this team is right now, is it Monty Williams and his coaching style? Is it Monty Williams and his inability to be able to get this team to defend? Is it Dell Demps? You made a comment that I've never heard before, playing fantasy basketball with basically his lineup. Do they share the blame here on what's happening?
I think so, absolutely. You know, Dell Demps is the guy, obviously, who's looking and searching and trying to find the right mix of players, and Monty's giving his input into what I need. At least you expect that's happening. But again, I just come back to the Tyreek Evans move and the Robin Lopez move, and I say, what are you doing? Why is this? And that was before the injuries happened, and you wonder who gets the final blame. They were both extended recently, so if somebody gets fired, somebody's going to be making a lot of money for not working.
Sure.
Right, and here Tyreek Evans is injured right now. So
right.
Again,
Rachel, do they share the blame here for what's happening on the court right now? Do they get a built-in pass because of what they've had to deal with over the last few years? NBA taking over the team, a cash-strapped owner in George Shinn who really couldn't put a lot of money into the team, and then now, of course, you come full circle, brand new owner who's at least put the money out. He's trying to be able to to put a quality product on the floor.
Yeah, no, I think all those things are water under the bridge. You know, it's about now for this team, and I mean the fantasy basketball analogy.
That was a great line, by the way.
It's just perfect. Yeah, it's just perfect. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody kind of has a hand in it, though. I mean, and when it comes to on the court, you know, it starts with the head coach. You know, for sure. Yeah.
I think you look at it in the arena, and I know fans are tired of hearing this, but the arena's empty now.
No,
there's no fans there, and that can't be fun for Tom Benson to see game in and game out.
Well, and look, the arena's never going to be full until football season's over. I mean, this is not a basketball town,
right.
Unless you have a superstar player who's going to draw people to the arena. Anthony Davis could be that guy down the line, but right now he's no Pistol Pete Maravich and he's no Chris Paul. And again, that's the draw. You know, New Orleans has always been a town that in basketball you got to have a superstar and they're going to come out and see you. High school football, college football, LSU, Saints, it's just basketball goes to the back burner. But when you get to January, people start paying attention, and you got to be in a position to be able to make a run, to be winning, to get people in the seats. And right now, they're not doing it.
No.
You know, it's two things. One, I kind of subscribe to that, but I also remember after that, it was the 07-08 season when they made that run. When they started the following year, during football season, they were sold out, I think, the first 7-8 games. And then things fell off. But you can sell out. You have to put a winner on the floor. And two, Anthony Davis should be the guy he is absolutely fun to watch play.
Absolutely.
You don't see a big man play defense the way he does and then run down the floor and make a dunk the way he does. I mean, he is a fun guy to watch. Even if they're losing, he's reason enough to come out and watch.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
Trade rumors still rolling right now about Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon obviously showcasing himself, if that's what we're doing right now, that he's on the trading block. I'll take you first, Rachel. Any opportunity you think before we get to the trading deadline, I think it's the February the 20th, where Eric Gordon may be moved?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there was a lot of talk about him last season, with his status with this team. But I mean, when he has nights like last night, it's disheartening for him not to be able to have that last shot. I mean, now granted, it remains to be seen what would have happened anyway, you know. But again, I mean, he's definitely going to be somebody to watch.
I think the big thing with him right now is the money he's making. His contract is enormous.
Yeah.
And until he can show that he can consistently be the guy night in and night out and be a consistent player, then I'm not sure many teams are going to want to really kind of buy into that.
$14 million next year, $15 million player option the following year. I've always said that they would be hard to move him until maybe next season when a team can take a flyer on him and it would probably be a contending team that's not worried about the cap. That's willing to go over the cap and pay the luxury tax that may be looking at him. But it'll be interesting to see that report came out, I think, last week. Another report came out just within the last couple days from USA Today, and they're talking about Pierre Jackson tearing up the D-League right now, wanting to try to get a contract with the Pelicans, but the Pelicans are unwilling to be able to bring him on. Your thoughts about Pierre Jackson, whether he's a guy that can come in and help this team in a lineup that has a tremendous amount of guards? Right,
exactly. I mean, he could easily be one of those guys. I mean, but it's just a matter of if the Pelicans want to, have room for him. But I mean, yeah.
Well, I think they're just trying to develop Austin Rivers at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Comes in as a number 10 pick. You don't want to give up on a guy that's picked that high all that quickly. And really, who else are you going to get rid of at that point?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, again, and when you look at Brian Roberts and Pierre Jackson, two very similar players. And right now, Roberts is playing fairly well for this team. So and you look at his contract, he's making about $788,000 this year, Roberts. He goes up to $1.1 million next year as a team option. Wow. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well. Let's head to the phone lines, 866-3200. James is in Franklinton. James, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, how you doing? Guys? I just wanted to basically ask you all a question because I don't think Monty Williams is the right person. I think he's done. I think they need a marquee coach. You got several of them sitting out there. What do you all think?
I think that's a popular opinion.
Exactly. Very popular sentiment right there.
It is. I swear.
Look, again, I wrote last year that Monty was probably not the right guy, and I stand by that right now. There are other guys out there, but I'm not sure there are other right guys out there at this point. I'm just not sure the way this roster is built, who would be the guy you bring in.
I've talked about on my radio show that, that this team might be in a better position to bring in a quality NBA lifer head coach, a former head coach, to come in and put him in the first chair to help Monty.
Yeah,
because at times, whether it's lineups, whether it's timeouts, he just seems to be a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
I think you hit it right there, is that it's not necessarily just Monty, it's that I'm not sure about the assistant coaches. This team suffered a lot when Mark Malone left.
I definitely agree with you there.
He was the defensive guy. He was the guy that really had things going. When he left, you could see things just kind of fall apart and spiral out of control. And Monty, I'm not sure he has the guys on the bench to help him.
We'll see. I mean, I think that maybe could help him and maybe could save his job. The question is, how many NBA former head coaches want to come in and be the first chair?
Come in and have to man this team. Yeah.
To Steve in Metairie. Steve, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing? First, my compliment. You guys are so knowledgeable on so many sports. Very, very impressive. But my question's about the Saints. I hear a lot of sportscasters talking about the Saints trying to get a fast wide receiver. It seems to me when I watch Drew Brees trying to hit Kenny Stills always seemed to be faster than Drew Brees could throw. It seemed like Drew Brees was underthrowing Kenny Stills. So it seems to me we have the fast wide receiver. And my question is, do y'all see the same thing, or do you see a need for a faster wide receiver?
Steve, thanks for the phone call. Guys, it's something that people have been talking about on my radio show. You guys are probably getting it at the paper and at WLTV.com. People are worried. I mean, I heard rumors this week Drew Brees is going to get his shoulder cleaned out. He's got injury, and nobody's talking about it, that he's lost arm strength. He can't get the ball downfield anymore. What are your thoughts on this?
That was huge,
where do you think Drew Brees is? Is it the fact you've been in the year? You're in year 13. Rachel, your thoughts?
Right. Yeah, that was a huge point of emphasis. Was especially when we saw Drew Brees on the road, he didn't throw downfield nearly as much as he did at home, and maybe it was just a confidence thing, or I mean, you wouldn't think so from a 13-year veteran necessarily, but I mean, yeah, the Saints have always had great depth at wide receiver, but again, they're not getting any younger, so I think a wide receiver is definitely an area of need.
I don't think you saw him underthrow very many passes in the Superdome.
Right.
I think the passes that were underthrown that weren't necessarily on point were outside in the conditions. And wind, more than anything, affects where the quarterback's throwing the ball and how he's throwing the ball.
And if he wants to wear that glove, too, which I still can't get over. And I'm screaming at him at the television, take the glove off.
Exactly. Yeah. In Philadelphia, there was no wind.
Right.
So the conditions weren't really an issue. Yeah, it was cold, but there was no wind. He was still able to be accurate.
There's naturally going to be some loss of arm strength. Peyton Manning has lost his arm strength.
Right.
Tom Brady's lost a little bit of arm strength. But you overcome that by knowing where your guys are and knowing the offense and how it's run. I personally, if I were a fan, I wouldn't be worried about Drew Brees. I mean, until the last 3 road games of the season, he was having one of his best years ever.
I think you upgrade the offensive line, you upgrade the wide receivers. There's no more talk about Drew Brees.
Agreed.
Exactly.
And people will be excited about what they're doing. And of course, also something I think we talked about, a strong running game. A running game that a defense can respect.
Sure.
And that they know that at any time you can go to that running game and can be effective. I think that's one of the things, obviously, that they have to look forward as well. Guys, thanks so much for being with us. I told you guys it was going to blow by. We're already in an hour. Thanks so much for being with us again. Rachel Whittaker of NOLA.com, Bradley Handwerger, WLTV.com. Thanks for coming down tonight. Certainly appreciate you guys coming on and look forward to having you on again as well.
Thank you so much.
Also want to thank everybody for watching tonight. And remember, there is a rebroadcast of this show that can be seen each and every Friday night here on WLAE TV at 10 o'clock and also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. Don't forget, you can also catch me on the radio weekdays 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on 990 a.m. WGSO. You can always listen live and download the podcast at ericasher.com of the radio show. And if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can check them out at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to our production staff here at WLAE, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, and also my producer, director, William Hill. My name is Eric Asher, for Rachel Whittaker, for Bradley Handwerger. Have a great evening, New Orleans. We'll see you right back here, 6 o'clock next Thursday night for Inside New Orleans Sports. Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.